Well, my name is Bart Conner, and in the movie Rad, I played a character named Bart Taylor. And it's kind of interesting how I came to be in the movie in the first place, because I just finished the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics, where I had won a couple of gold medals. And when they were casting for the film, I got a call from Hal Needham, and I actually had an agent in New York at the time who said, you know, the guy who did Smokey and the Bandit and all those movies, Cannonball Run. I said, he wants to talk to you about a movie they're doing about BMX, and it's kind of like gymnastics on bikes. It might be a good fit for you. So, you know, I thought that'd be cool. Send me a script, and I'd try to figure out whether it made sense for me. And next thing I knew, Hal was traveling across the country because he was supporting a NASCAR team. He had a car called the Skull Bandit. And Harry Gant was his NASCAR driver, and he said, I want to come see you. So he met me in Oklahoma, where I lived, and you know, I was prepared to read lines and all this stuff, and we sat around the living room, we had a cup of coffee, we talked about race cars, because I was into race cars, and the next thing he just goes, okay, you're in my film, and then we just went to the airport. That was it. So it was good to meet him, and of course, he's such an icon in the movie industry and a rebel in many ways. So having Hal Needham on this picture was really a perfect fit, I think. When I think about the film Rad, you know, I come from a different world. There were sort of two camps at Rad. There was the Hollywood folks, which, you know, was Bill Allen and Lori Loughlin and the production team and Hal Needham and all of his guys. And then there was the BMX guys, and they were all, of course, you know, the up-and-coming, you know, icons in BMX, and, you know, whether it's Eddie Fiola or, you know, Martin Aparijo or any of these guys. And then I was this, like, lone wolf, because I was like the token Olympic gymnast guy who was brought in to be in the film. So I wasn't in either camp. I didn't come from Hollywood, and I didn't come from BMX. And so it was kind of weird. I was very well accepted by them, but it was, I definitely, when I look back at the film all these years later, people often talk to me about Rad. And it's kind of funny because literally I meet people who know the movie Rad, but have no idea that I used to be an Olympic gymnast. They just know me from Rad. And I mean, literally I have strangers. I'll be walking down the street and a guy will stop me and go, dude, Bart Taylor! Awesome! And then they just keep walking. It just kills me. And it's all these years later, and I still get it. And who would have thought that the film would have such a intense cult following? But I'm really proud of that. So many years ago, I'm at a fundraiser in LA for the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and I'm up on a stage, and there's a bunch of celebrity athletes that there were the special guests for the occasion. And so you got to picture this, because I'm standing between Magic Johnson and Shaquille O'Neal, and I'm talking to these guys, and they're introducing us, and we're standing up there just kind of fumbling around, and while they're, you know, talking about our athletic careers. And while I'm standing next to Shaq, and it's the first time I've ever met him, he leans way down and goes, hey man, I loved you in that movie, Rad. That was cool. It was cool, and then I had this visual. I'm thinking, can you imagine, you know, Shaquille O'Neal on a BMX bike? That had to be one big bike. But he was cool, and he loved the film, and I don't know, it just, the fact that it resonated with so many people. And I meet a lot of guys who are sort of, you know, between about 28 and about 38 years old right now, who they just lived for that film. I mean, they wore out the Blockbuster videos that they rented, and they know every line, and that's just so cool that all these years later, it had such an impact on young boys at that time in their lives when they were looking for something cool to connect with. And that's the thing about film, you can never really know how it might impact a generation of kids. And apparently that's what Rad has done for a lot of young men. They just thought that was the coolest thing they've ever seen. You know, the movie was really, it was the coolest sort of X Games kind of stuff before the X Games was around. It was a new sport that people were kind of experimenting with. The movie was campy enough that it also had a little bit of a following there. And the music was incredible. And I just think for young boys, you know, maybe between about, I don't know, 9 and 15, when they were kind of just sort of growing up, And the movie was a little edgy, which is kind of cool. There was a couple of bad words in the movie, which is probably really cool to young boys. I mean, on all those levels, the movie really connected with a lot of young men. And so as they grow up these days, I hear stories from them all the time about how much, I mean, they'll stop me on the street and start reciting lines from the movie. I mean, that's just wild. I guess it was about 3 or 4 years ago. You know, I live in Norman, Oklahoma. I have just a sort of a typical house in the suburban area there of Oklahoma City. And one day my doorbell rings, and so I go to my front door, and it's these two guys, and they're probably about 30 years old, 33 years old. And they're like, "Dude, rad! That's so awesome!" And then they took off. They were like afraid to talk to me or something. I'm like, "How you doing?" And so it's amazing. And I had a guy one time come to my office, and it was about 9 o'clock on the middle of the week, and we have a gymnastics school in Oklahoma where I live. And literally, he wanted to tell me all about RAD, and he knew all about the film. And so I said, "Hey, let me show you something." So I went back in my office, and I have a whole box full of RAD memorabilia. I got jackets and my original costume that I wore and some script notes and things like that. And the guy just about freaked out. He goes, "Just name a price. You tell me how much you want for all of that stuff, and I'll give you it. Whatever the number is, I don't care what number you say, I'm paying." And I said, "Sorry, I'm not going to sell this stuff. It means too much to me." So I still have all that cool stuff, and I'm proud that I do. Well, these days, of course, you know, I stay connected to the things that I'm known for and successful at, and that's, of course, gymnastics. So we have the Bart Conner Gymnastics Academy, which is in Norman, Oklahoma. We have 1,300 students, and altogether with our various companies, we have about 50 employees that all do things related to gymnastics. We publish a magazine called International Gymnast Magazine. We make grips, gymnastics wristbands, tumbling shoes, accessories for the sport of gymnastics, hand guards and things like that. We have a small leotard line, and I still work as a commentator for ESPN, commentating on gymnastics, and produce a few gymnastics television shows. So everything we do is sort of lined up with what I really am passionate about, which is gymnastics. And so that's kind of how I keep myself busy these days. My wife, Nadia Comaneci, was a pretty good gymnast. I like to tell people in our household we have 11 Olympic medals. Of course, 9 of them were hers. So together we have a 7-year-old boy who is the love of our life, and that's the reason for getting up in the morning. So life is good, and we have a house here in Venice Beach, which we spend part-time, and we're down here. It's really kind of cool with my kid now because he's got his first bike. He wants a BMX bike. You know, of course, he's into skating and surfing and snowboarding, and it's really kind of cool to introduce him to all that, the culture and all that. So I think there'll be a time. He's never seen the movie Rad. So someday I'm going to sit him down and say, "Hey, kid, you got to check this out. Here's your dad." And that'll be a proud day for me.
All right, I'm Martin Aparijo.
Eddie Thiola.
Bart Conner.
Bill Allen.
Sam Bernard.
Jeremy Moser.
Jose Yanez.